This is the third in our series on the Sefirot. The first two classes, we tried to present a foundation for understanding where the Sefirot come from, what their names are, their importance, how they manifest themselves in the world. And tonight, I'm going to attempt to go through all the Sefirot somewhat quickly, because as we continue this series, it's really important that people have the basic idea of what the Sefirot are and their inner dimensions. I will remind everyone that we've learned that the Sefirot manifest themselves in three different ways. One, they're a manifestation of God's light and energy from God's infinite being into the finite world. Secondly, the Sefirot manifest themselves as part of the physical, material world and the more spiritual worlds. And thirdly, the Sefirot manifests as a roadmap of the soul, of the human psyche. So what we're going to call the outside dimensions of the Sefirot, these are the names that most people are familiar with: Keter, Chokhmah, Binah, Chesed and Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach and Hod, Yesod, and Malchut. But then there are what I call the inner dimensions of the Sefirot, which relate very directly to the human soul and the psyche and the intellect and the emotions. So we're going to do a survey tonight, and the best thing I can do, not because the share didn't work for us, so I will mention to everyone, we sent this chart out. The chart I was going to share, yes, we shared it on the WhatsApp. So if people can open their WhatsApp as we are speaking, you'll have the chart. Anyways, we have the Sefirot back here, and I will refer to these Sefirot. Okay, so here we go. We're going to, as I said, this is going to be a quick overview, so everyone will have a sense of what the Sefirot are and a little bit about them. So in future classes, we'll have what to work with. So we're going to start with Keter, the highest of the Sefirot. Keter means crown, and similar to, let's say, my kippah that sits on my head. The head represents the intellect. That will be Chokhmah, Binah, and again, there's a hidden Sefirah here. That's Dat. That's the intellect. And the lower seven Sefirot, this relates to the emotional and the behavioristic, intuitive parts of the human psyche. So we begin with Keter, and it means, like I said, it means crown, and it represents the supraconscious. In other words, above regular consciousness, it hovers over us. And that's why, for example, in the Tanya, the Bala Tanya never mentions Keter. It's always Chokhmah, Binah, and Dat, which of course is where we get the name Chabad. Chabad is the first letters of Chokhmah, Binah, and Dat: wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. So Keter is the supraconscious, and the numerical value of Keter is 620. Now, what's interesting, because this last week was the giving of the Torah, we know that we have 613 mitzvot, and we also, there are two different versions how to get from 613 to 620. One is if you add the 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach, the 7 commandments of the children of Noach, which is applicable to all mankind. So 613 and 7 equals 620 equals Keter. And the other version is that there are 7 mitzvot of the rabbis that have the power of a Torah mandated mitzvah. So if you add those, we have 620. Now, the amazing thing is, when we read the 10 commandments last week, the 10 commandments have exactly 620 letters, has Keter letters, 620 letters. So here, what we're saying is that really the ultimate source of all of the mitzvot is in Keter, in the highest level, and then it filters down to this world. Now, the inner levels of Keter, there are 3 inner levels. Emunah, which is faith, Ta'anug, which is pleasure, and Ratzon, which is will. So I'm looking at the chats here, and it is pointed out that on page 600, anyone who has my book Orchard of Delights, this chart is on page 648, and everyone who has 70 faces, then this chart is on page 441. And I think it will make it easier for people to follow what we're saying by following the chart. So the 3 inner levels of Keter, of the crown, is faith, pleasure, and will. And these are surrounding energies that really direct everything about a human being, but they're very, very ethereal. They're not easy to pin down. And they're coming from the supraconscious. But we know that animals, for example, are hardwired for pleasure and survival. And that's like a lower manifestation of the highest level of Keter, because here we have pleasure and we have will. Will can be translated into the will to survive. But here we're talking about will and pleasure on a much higher level. But let's start with faith. We're told that Emunah is actually the highest level of supraconsciousness. And this really directs our whole lives. In other words, those things that we have faith in, that we believe in, that is what directs us. That's what directs our desire for pleasure. But here we're talking about a spiritual pleasure, the pleasure that we get from Shabbat. That's why the pleasure of Shabbat is called Oneg Shabbos. It translates into a physical pleasure. On Shabbos, we eat 3 luscious meals, the best meals of the week. But on a higher level, Oneg is the pleasure that the soul has in its being a part of God. That is the pleasure that we're talking about. That Shabbos connects us to the Creator in a way that almost nothing else does. So this Oneg Shabbat is in the highest level. So here we have faith, pleasure, and will. And will is manifest 24/7, and everything that we do is a manifestation of the choices we make, of where our will is directing us. But the important thing is these three levels of faith, really divine pleasure, spiritual pleasure, Torah pleasure, and will are all coming from the highest place in Keter. Now we're going to go to Chokhmah, to wisdom. Wisdom is, there's actually a bridge, as it were, between will and wisdom. And that's where these higher levels of consciousness, of faith, pleasure, and will are brought down into our intellect, into our normative consciousness. And so Chokhmah, in a sense, is the first of the Sefirot. That's why the Balatanya, he talks about Chokhmah, Binah, and Dat, as if Keter it's above normative intellect. We're drawing on it all the time. It's a surrounding energy. We talk about that God has two manifestations. One's called Sovev, called Olmin. God surrounds all worlds. He's above the world. He's transcendent, above time and space, above all description, above all conception. And there's the immanent revelation of God in every point of space and every moment of time. And this is called Mimale, called Olmin. God fills all the worlds. So it's very similar in a human being. In Keter, the surrounding energy is faith, pleasure, and will. Emunah, Ta'anug, and Ratzon. And then, starting with Chokhmah, it's brought down into more of an immanent consciousness that we're more aware of. So the word Chokhmah, if you permute the letters, is Koach-ma, the power of essence. Ma is a question, but it also means, Malchut means essence. So Chokhmah is the type of wisdom that brings us to the essence of things. Wisdom here does not mean learning a lot of facts and even mastering a profession or an art or a science. It's a much more all-encompassing type of wisdom that takes us to the essence of things. Many times, Chokhmah is described as lightning flashes of insight, because they're really coming from Keter, but being drawn down into the intellect, and like lightning bolts of innovative ideas, of, in Hebrew, chidushim, new ideas, insight, new insight. So this is all the idea of Chokhmah. We say every morning in our prayers, Kulam b'Chokhmah asita. God made everything with wisdom. And here, even in modern science, they're now talking about that material reality is really just encoded information. That information is the wisdom of God being channeled into this world. So every morning we say to God, you made everything in wisdom. So that's the level of Chokhmah now. We also have a phrase, Torah mechokhmah nafkat. Torah comes out of wisdom. Again, wisdom is the bridge that's drawing from the higher levels into consciousness. That's what the Torah talks in the language of human beings. It's a symbolic language, but it's talking to human beings, but it's taking from a much higher level of wisdom in the upper worlds and, in a sense, translating it into concepts and ideas that we can understand. Now, what is the inner dimension of Chokhmah? According to Chassidut, it's bitul. Bitul means selflessness. It means opening oneself up to receiving a higher level of wisdom. So the selflessness is to get the ego out of the way in order to be able to contact and access this higher level of wisdom. It says in Pirkei Avot that the fence around wisdom is silence, is shtika. And therefore, we're told that meditation and prayer and contemplation opens us up and gets the ego out of the way in order for us to become channels for wisdom. Okay, our next sephirot is Binah. And before we go to Binah, I'll mention that in Kabbalah, Chokhmah is always called father, and Binah is called mother. And the expression is that Chokhmah and Binah, wisdom and understanding, are like two beloveds who never part from each other. Because Chokhmah, as we expressed, is lightning bolts of insight, but those lightning bolts of insight need Binah, the mother, to nurture the concept or the idea into reality. So it's also expressed that Chokhmah is the father giving over seed, and Binah is the mother that takes that seed and, like an embryo, develops it and brings it into fruition, makes it alive. So Binah comes from the word boneh, to build, or the word bain, which means between. And so the way that the sages explained Binah is lahavin davar betoch davar. Binah is the ability to understand one thing inside another. Just like a fetus grows in the womb, Binah takes ideas from Chokhmah and gives them life and develops them, and through analysis and through deep contemplation brings them into the world. The inner dimension of Binah is simcha, joy. And the verse that is always brought to explain Binah is Aim Habanim Smecha. A mother of children is joyous, is happy. So here, Binah is the mother image, and in a sense, all the lower sephirot are her children. That is the idea of Binah. Binah gives birth, as it were, to the lower sephirot. So this simcha is the simcha of of bringing into reality different ideas or concepts or dreams or our will. In other words, when we accomplish and we fulfill what we hope to do, it brings a great joy. Now, another dimension of the joy of Binah is the word, one of the two words that is most commonly used for meditation is heat, bone, and nut. Heat, bone, and nut, coming from the word Binah. And from this, we learn a very, very important thing. Even though there are many, many types of meditation worldwide, and many types of meditation even within Judaism, but the primary unique meditation of Judaism is to meditate on the Torah, to meditate on the words of the Torah, the different worlds, the levels of the soul, the letters, names of God, verses in the Torah, stories in the Torah. And when we meditate in this way, so again, it's taking from new ideas, and that brings tremendous joy. Remember in like cartoons, when someone has like a brainstorm, like the light bulb goes off in the brain. So, but this is a source of great joy. So in Judaism, meditation should lead to joy. It's not only peace of mind and connecting with inner levels of the soul, connecting with God, but it's an opportunity to experience true joy with getting into the depths of the Torah. The next sephirot is Chesed. Here we're beginning what are called the more emotional levels of the sephirot. And the first three will be what are called the sephirot of the heart. And these are called the more behavioristic, intuitive, instinctive parts of the psyche. So the next sephirah is, well, actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to dot. And we don't have a circle here because according to tradition, we always talk about 10 sephirot. So if you count Keter, we don't count dot. And if we count dot, we don't count Keter. Because dot is considered a mirror image of Keter, but in, we'll call it more normative consciousness. Dot means knowledge. And dot, as you can see, it's right in the middle. And it draws down from Chokhmah and Binah and Keter. And then it draws down into all the other sephirot. So dot, of course, is connected to the Eitz HaDat, Tov V'Ra, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Because according to tradition, the place of choice of free will is coming from dot. And this is because it's right under Keter. It's where we draw will, ratzon, into our consciousness. But one of the greatest gifts and challenges that God gives us is the ability to make choices, to have free will. And so right under dot comes Chesed and Gevurah, the two seeming opposites. And this is where choice comes in. Now, the inner dimension of dot is somewhat paradoxically is yichud, is unification. Because ultimately all dualities are Jewish consciousness is always trying to take opposites and see how they're unified. You see behind me all of the Magen Davids, where a triangle is two opposites that meet in a single point, or from above, two opposites that meet in a single point. This is the basics of Jewish logic and consciousness, always recognizing the duality of the world, the plurality of the world, but always looking for the unification. So here, Dat is, in a sense, holding out for every person to choose between this and this. And yet, if we realize that these choices are ultimately unified, that is what helps us make correct choices. So he said, so unification, and where this word first comes in as a verb is Adam yada et Chava ishto. Adam knew his wife. And we're told that that is a euphemism for intimate relations. Adam knew his wife intimately. And so we understand that, again, this is bringing two opposites together, male and female, in a unity. So now we'll go to Chesed. This is Chesed, and then right afterwards we'll do Gevurah, it's opposite. And in the Sefirot, in a sense, these are held as the two archetypal opposites. Chesed means loving kindness, goodness, altruism, giving, and Gevurah is restraint, holding back, focus, tzimtzum, and this is Chesed is extrovert, Gevurah is introvert, and they seem to be opposites. But as we just explained, our attempt is always to see the unity between opposites, and so really Chesed and Gevurah complement each other. In the Kabbalah, so Chesed is called love, ahava, and Gevurah is called yira, fear or awe. And the Zohar says that the human being depends on the unity of ahava and yira, and explains it as a bird with two wings. One wing is love, and one is awe or fear. Now, when we say fear, that word is, we'll call it pretty politically incorrect. People don't like to hear that word. But the Jewish concept of fear of God is very, very different than fear of physical, material reality. Here, the fear is that I don't want to do anything that will distance me from the ones that I love. And here, if we're talking about the fear of God, is based on, because I love God so much, I don't want to do anything that will distance me. I have a fear, but not, it's in Hebrew, the type of fear that we usually talk about is called pachad. Pachad means I'm afraid. Here it's not being afraid of God. It's having the ultimate respect and honor due to God. That's the type of fear that we're talking about. And so that's why, in a sense, it's a very, very healthy thing to have this type of fear. And even in this world, we're told that students should have a sense of yira for their teacher, or their Rebbe, or their Rebbitzin, or for our parents. This idea of there's a certain, like in modern times, many parents want to be best friends with their children, which is a beautiful thing. It really is a beautiful thing. But there's a certain place that children always have to recognize that their parents are their parents and are due a certain amount of kavod. It was right in the Ten Commandments that we have to have a certain honor, a certain awe of our parents. It doesn't mean we can't be best friends with them, but there are certain borders that need to be maintained in a parent-child relationship. That's a whole other discussion. So going back to Chesed and love, we're told that the 7 days of creation mirror the 7 lower Sefirot. In other words, the first day of creation is Chesed, the second day of creation is Gevurah, the third day is Tiferet, and so forth. And actually, if we go through what actually was created in each one of these days, it fits perfectly with the Sefirot. It's just like a perfect match, how each day is represented by one of these Sefirot. Because remember, we said in the beginning that the outside names and manifestation of the Sefirot have to do with the creation of the world and how the world is recreated and maintained at all times. And the inner dimension is how it affects the soul. So the first day of creation is Chesed, and Rashi points out, and others as well, and it's very, very similar to the idea of the Big Bang, where Rashi says that everything that would ever be created was already created on the first day. And then it's just a manifestation, a progression, a flowering, a unfolding of all of the energies that were all there on the first day. That's why the first day is called Yom Echad, day one, because in this oneness is found all of creation. But this affects to the idea of love, is that God creates the world from a place of love. And this love goes with all the rest of creation, goes with all the other days. And Gevurah, sometimes Gevurah gets kind of like a bad name because it represents judgment, it represents borders, it represents like law and order. But where would we be if there were not laws of nature? We obviously could not survive. The laws of nature, in a sense, is the greatest chesed that God could do. That's the only way that the world can exist, is that they're dependable, regular laws of nature, and there are borders and there's definition, and that is what creates the structure that allows worlds to exist, to life to exist. So Gevurah, too much love, unbridled love that has no borders, is not a positive thing. There have to be borders. If no borders, you end up in adultery. end up with all kinds of not positive manifestations. Incest, there has to be borders to love. And so Gevurah is what gives Chesed its right balance. So now we go to Tiferet, right in the middle. It's literally in the middle of the Sefirot, from above to below, and from the two sides. And Tiferet is translated as beauty. And it's a type of beauty which means harmony, integration, synthesis. That's the type of beauty that we're talking about. It's the ability to take Chesed and Gevurah and to create the right balance. Now, what's interesting is that the root for Tiferet is Pe'er. Pe'er means beauty, one of the words for beauty. But if you take those same letters and permute them, it's the same word for Rofeh, for healing. And this is a whole other subject, but this is a tremendous hint to the secret of good health is a balanced diet, balanced exercise, a balanced consciousness that doesn't allow us to be in stress all the time. And that's the secret of good health. It's just everything is just the right measure. Not too much of this, not too much of that, right in the middle. That's the type of beauty that is manifest in the body when there is balance. Tiferet is the heart. Even in the Sefirot, it's the heart. All of the Sefirot really is the structure of the human body. We haven't pointed that out, but in the Zohar, Chesed is called the right arm. Gevurah is called the left arm. Netzach is the right leg. Hod is the left leg. This is the head. This is the spine here. This is the sexual organs. And Malchut is like the feet, but it's really connected to actually the mouth. So the structure of the Sefirot is the structure of the human body, and Tiferet is the heart. And so the inner dimension of Tiferet is called Rachamim, compassion, mercy. Sometimes Chesed is called mercy, but Tiferet is Rachamim. It's the depths of the heart, the ability to empathize with other people and people's situations in life, and to actually act upon that compassion. And so compassion is giving too much sometimes is not good. Holding back is not good. So too much chesed or too much gevurah, it needs to be balanced in Tiferet. So Tiferet is the balance of chesed and gevurah, and it's manifest in rachamim. Now we're going to Netzach, which is right here. As we said, it's the right leg. And Netzach means victory or eternity. In modern Hebrew, the word for a conductor in an orchestra is a menatzeach. And actually, we have that word many, many times in Psalms. So Netzach, these last four are called the powers of behavioristic powers, instinctive powers. Meaning, up here we started with wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, Chokhmah, Binah, and Dat. And then we went to Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferet. These are the heart of the emotions. And as we move down in the Sefirot, it becomes, as it were, more, not practical, but it's drawn down more into actual action. So Netzach, as conductor, is the power to take the different energies of the Sefirot and to orchestrate them so they can actually be manifest in the world. The inner dimension of Netzach is bitachon, which means confidence or self-assurity. And so this is a very, very important idea, because up to here, we had the intellect, we had the heart, but starting with Netzach is, again, the ability to translate all of that into a self-assured person who's able and willing to put their ideas and their beliefs, going all the way back up to Keter, their beliefs, and to channel their will into practical reality. And that's why it's connected to the right leg, because walking represents movement and accomplishment. Now, when we say self-assurity or security, this doesn't mean egotism. Of course, it's a very fine line, but here we're just talking about a person recognizing their abilities and not being overly proud of them or using them to rule over other people. But it's a very healthy recognition of what my abilities are, what my talents are, and what I want to accomplish in this world. So that's why Netzach is victory. This is the sephirot that leads to victory. And it's coming from an inner place of bitachon, of self-assurity. Then we have Hod, the left leg. And these sometimes in different Kabbalistic paradigms or models, Netzach and Hod are even considered as like one sephirot, because to walk, you might start with your right leg, but if you don't take that next step, you're not going anywhere. So Hod is the complementary energy to Netzach that allows a continuation. In other words, Netzach, how many times do we have something we want to accomplish and we're on fire, we're inspired, we're going to do it, and we take symbolically that first step, and then for various reasons we lose interest, we become afraid of the obstacles, we get wishy-washy. Hod is that power in the soul that gives us the ability to finish what we start. Now, Hod, of all of the sephirot, has the most varied types of meanings. Hod means glory. It is the root of the word thanks, todah. It's the root of praise, lehodot. It also means to acknowledge. In Hebrew, lehodot ala emet is to acknowledge the truth. And it's also the root for confession. Vidui comes from Hod. And in fact, the word for Jew, which comes from the tribe of Yehuda, the root of Yehuda is Hod. Because Leah said when she gave birth to Yehuda, she said, this time I will really praise God. Like, of course, I've been praising God all the time, but having a fourth son, this is like, this is like over anything I could have imagined. And so in acknowledgement, and that's the root of the word Yehudi, is Hod. So it has all of these meanings. We could spend a whole class discussing Hod. Its inner dimension is Tamimut, is sincerity. And this is the first time we see this word is with Yaakov. Yaakov is described as Ish Tam Yoshev Oalim, as a sincere person who sat in the tents. Here we understand that it means the tents of learning. He was a very contemplative type of neshama and sincere. But the word for tamimut, the root tamim, also means whole. Means, again, this idea of complementing netzach, the ability to complete. Whole here means actually to complete. So all of this has to do with Hod. Our next sephirot is Yesod, right here. And you can see it's almost like Yesod is like a funnel. All the other sephirot have to come through Yesod to get down to the final sephirot, which is kind of what we'll call the stage where all of reality is happening, is Malchut. But it all has to come through Yesod. And Yesod means foundation. It's in a sense, the foundation of the sephirot, because it's towards the bottom. And it's, in a sense, holding up all the other sephirot and channeling all that energy into one step below it, into Malchut. So Yesod's inner dimension is called Emet, truth. And here truth also means verification. It means, again, as we move down the sephirot, in a sense, it comes more and more into actualizing in reality. And that's why Malchut is, in a sense, the stage of where everything happens. But it has to go through Yesod. So Yesod is the idea of basing our foundation of our life on those things that we feel are emet, are true. And that is a very deep understanding of how to live life. Not like from moment to moment, but that we establish a foundation based on truth, and then everything comes from that. Yesod is always connected to what's called the tzaddik, the righteous person, because there's a verse, tzaddik yesod olam. The tzaddik is the foundation of the world. And because we have this idea that each one of us has a point of the tzaddik within us, there's also tzaddikim, great righteous people, leaders of the generation, or sometimes hidden leaders. We have a tradition of 36 hidden tzaddikim that are holding up the world through their good deeds. But each one of us has a point of the tzaddik, and that's the point of that our foundation is based on this point of goodness, of realness that each one of us has within. Yesod is also always connected to sexuality because, as we explained before, each of the sephirot is connected to a part of the body. And Yesod is connected to the sexual organs. But here, sexuality is more than just sexuality. It means fruitfulness. It means the ability to give birth to reality, to take all of the energies from the upper sephirot and to actually give birth to them. Just like we said, Binah gives birth to the lower sephirot. And here we're getting towards the end of the sephirot. Now it has to be brought into fruition. And therefore, Yesod is also very connected to creativity. This idea of, again, taking all of the energies of the sephirot above it and being creative with these energies and to bring them into the world. The final sephira and the bottom is Malchut, which means kingship. And as I said already, this is like the stage. This is the place that everything gets played out, is in Malchut. And this is a place of leadership. And we're not talking about just political leaders, that each person has the ability to lead, even if it's only themselves, is to lead. Parents are the greatest leaders to their children, the greatest teachers of their children. This is also called accepting upon ourselves the yoke of heaven. The yoke of heaven is God is king. And it's in Malchut that the expression is to accept Malchut Shemayim, the kingship of heaven in our daily life. This is the secret of saying 100 blessings a day, where we say, blessed are you, God, King of the universe, where we accept upon ourselves that God is ruling over us. But that actually gives us power to be leaders in our own right. Now, the inner dimension of Malchut is somewhat paradoxically, at least it seems like it, but it isn't, is shiflut. Shiflut means lowliness. Here we mean existential lowliness, a sense of humility in our relationship with God. Lowly does not mean being a floor mat. It just means a honest acknowledgement of our whole being in relationship to an infinite creator. Now, we didn't discuss the different personalities that are connected to the different sephirot, but I'll mention it now because I want to end with David. But Chesed is always associated with Avraham. Yitzchak is Gevurah. Yaakov is Tiferet. Moshe is Netzach. Aharon is Hod. Yosef, the tzaddik, is Yesod. And David HaMelech is Malchut. And I wanted to explain this because to understand shiflut, David was an incredibly strong, forceful, assertive leader. But in his own mind, he had a deep sense of shiflut. You can see it throughout the Psalms. And it comes from a verse when he's bringing the Mishkan and the Aron HaKodesh up to Jerusalem. And he makes it into this incredible celebration. And he's dancing like crazy. He's like out of his kalim, out of his vessels in joy, dancing in front of the ark on the way to Jerusalem. If anyone could just imagine Simchas Torah and dancing with the Torahs. So here's David HaMelech is like, he's just beyond joy. And his wife, Michal, sees him dancing like this, and she rebukes him. She kind of says to him, you made a fool out of yourself, dancing so crazily like that. And David says, Bahayiti shafel ba'enai. You don't understand where I was holding while I was doing this. Bahayiti shafel ba'enai. In my own eyes, I was completely without ego when I was dancing before God, before the ark. I was very lowly in my own eyes. And so this has become a paradigm for Jewish leaders. I can't say that it's manifest so much today, but throughout history, so many Jewish leaders actually ran from the burden of leadership that God was, in a sense, putting on them. Moses is a perfect example. For 7 days, he argued at the burning bush, please send anyone else. I'm not up for it. I'm not the right person. I don't have it in me. And Gideon also tried his best to get out of it. Jeremiah tries to get out of it. Joshua, he sat in Moshe's tent for 40 years. And at one point, when two people were prophesying in the tent that Moshe would die and Yoshua would bring the people into the land, Yoshua went to Moshe and said, stop them, shut them up. Don't let them say this. So throughout Jewish history, real Jewish leaders have always not run after the leadership. They took it upon themselves very reluctantly, with a great amount of shiflut, of existential lowliness. Okay, so I admit we went through these fairly quickly, but for those who have been following the series and will continue to follow the series, so now when I mention a sephirot or the inner dimension, hopefully everyone now has a little bit, a taste of what we're talking about here. And we will continue in upcoming weeks, trying to understand even more, because one of the first things we said is that the Hebrew letters and the sephirot are the DNA of creation, of existence. And the more we understand about the sephirot, the more alive they become, and the more we start to actually experience them in our own lives. This is the most important thing, is that we're not looking at it as an intellectual model that is, it's very nice, but it doesn't affect me at all. The idea is, and especially the inner dimensions that we talked about tonight, and I'm going to mention them very, very quickly right now. I'll do it in English. Faith, pleasure, will, selflessness, joy, unity, love, fear or awe, compassion, self-assurity, sincerity, truth, and humbleness. So we could see, like, if we understand the sephirot, that is what makes an integrated, holistic person. When we start to understand that these sephirot, which manifest themselves everywhere from the physical worlds to the spiritual worlds, but most importantly within ourselves. And so hopefully everyone will continue with the series and we'll go from strength to strength.